it's finally happening. We actually get to discuss a Marvel-related thing with regards to trans representation on this channel. Now, it's not admittedly one of the main cast or characters, but it is still from a somewhat hit show that received an awful lot of praise and many rewards heaped upon it for basically every single damn thing that it did, and it is also a show that is designed to be for children. And trust me, trans kids need any kind of support they can get right now with the way things are going.
To restrict the sale or supply of puberty blockers for under 18s.
That's right, it's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, the show about Lunella Lafayette, who, with her genius mind, was able to create a portal and bring Devil Dinosaur into New York City, a big red T-Rex who I guess you can fight crime with if you want. Now, there are a few trans characters for us to be aware of going into this show, a few openly trans characters, which is already pretty big for a Marvel and Disney show. Those guys don't really let us get much of a spotlight at all generally, and those characters are Brooklyn and Ty, both of whom are fellow schoolmates of Lunella's. There are also a bunch of big name actors involved in this too, like Alison Brie, Maya Hawke, Jonathan Banks, Wesley Snipes, not Blade, Sam Riegel, and Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, this show is stacked with stuff and is a truly very fun romp. I'm frankly a little annoyed to find out that the last episodes of Season 2 releasing next year will be all of it. It did end up getting cancelled for unspecific reasons, though everyone has their own 2 cents for why exactly it happened, and who can really say.
Lunella Lafayette!
To get us back on track though, we're here to talk specifically about the trans episode of this show. The trans episode which is... Well, it should be right here from what I've been told. Am I missing something? The Wikipedia says that episode 6 of season 2 is titled The Gatekeeper, and is an episode about trans people within school sports. And yet, on Disney, it seems to suggest that the show goes straight from Kid Kree to Wishtar. Oh, I see. Well, ain't that something? The one episode that gets mysteriously withheld for reasons is the one that puts trans people front and center in it. Well, thankfully, due to the power of the internet, I have a copy of the banned episode. Withheld episode. And so we're going to watch it regardless of what Disney wants us to do, cause fuck those guys. They ain't never done shit for my community regardless, and frankly, keep doing their absolute best to shoot us down as much as possible without getting major backlash. As for the deeper exploration of trans people behind the scenes of this show, and the reasons for this episode being removed for an indefinite period of time, let's save that discussion for after we watch it, because the episode might tell us the reason it got forcefully removed from the only platform it was hosted on. So, with that said, enough quiffling and quaffling, let's get into Season 2's episode 6? Of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, The Gatekeeper. Okay, immediately starting very strong with something that isn't actually related to the trans thing at all, but I gotta say, I understand the people raving about the art style. Moon Girl looks fucking gorgeous. The way the characters are drawn, the colours that are used, the style of it, it's all pretty damn sweet stuff. Oh, and we also get immediately introduced to our trans character to care about, who is Brooklyn for this episode, the head of the volleyball team.
Huddle up, squirrels. Team, why is today special?
We also get introduced to our villain of the episode, that of Coach Greer, a very Karen-looking character, and I just have to assume that design was intentional. However, we start off with Greer seeming like a nice person, despite the warnings of the Squirrels coach, the Squirrels being the squad with all our main and side characters on it, as she offers some oranges to the Squirrels, and even seems to be invested in all the girls having a good fun time.
Who wants orange slices?
Oh, I like her.
I should also mention the fact here that we had, as an audience, not received confirmation of the trans status of Brooklyn before this episode, something which gets its first initial massive hinting towards by her having a water bottle with the sticker "Trans is beautiful" and also rainbow-coloured knee pads. You know, some visual drizzles in there to make you think, oh, okay, yeah, this person might not be straight or cis. Brooklyn then just straight up mentions the fact that she used to play on the boys' team back in the day, said while talking to Ty, who, as we've mentioned, is the other trans character in the show, a non-binary character, and yeah, this volleyball team really has got it all. A trans woman and a non-binary person who get to have a little moment showing out how they've changed, which is immediately ruined by that Coach Greer lady overhearing the conversation and having a huge freak out about this revelation.
Boys team?
Greer then goes and conspiratorially tries to inform the Squirrels coach about this fact, doing it like this is some kind of huge deal that he might not know about, and sort of leaning a little bit into that whole rumor mill scandal aspect that a few people treat trans identity as. And we find from the Squirrels coach that he knows that she's trans and doesn't understand why Greer's bothering to tell him.
Boys team. Boys team.
Which leads to us hearing the oh-so-oft-mentioned statement of how it isn't fair for a trans woman to be involved in women's sports.
This is a girls' volleyball league. Only girls can play.
Brooklyn is a girl.
Yeah, this is a pretty topical episode for the time, and hopefully one that is gonna be a little bit more based in the reality of the situation than South Park or Lady Baller's attempts to do the same story.
I'm with her.
I will also say this right here and right now, I'm saving my spiel about trans people in sport until the analysis portion of this video, so that we don't get too off track. The Squirrels coach gets into a minor fracas with Greer as she demands that Brooklyn is taken off the court, and our good guy coach defends the fact that Brooklyn is a girl, and that within the rules, she's allowed to play on the team. Unfortunately though, this good guy coach then immediately gets knocked the fuck out by some oranges on the floor, and Greer takes this as an opportunity to try and force the Squirrels to forfeit because the rules require them to have a coach to play. And you might be sensing a little bit of a theme here about Greer, wherein she has this very specific mindset of how things must be based on an arbitrary clinging to rules regardless of their application or their sensibility.
Well, according to Clause 3.5 in the Regional Volleyball Constitution...
Something that I'm totally sure isn't an allegory or something. Definitely not. Brooklyn defends herself and her team from Greer's overcritical attempts to attack her and everything that she is, though we do get a little moment where it's kind of clear how much this sucks for Brooklyn to have to deal with. A good reminder, if anything, for the audience of how these kinds of adults making the children who just want to be able to play sports and live as themselves lives an absolute hell are monsters, and we just sort of expect the kids to have to be able to stand up for themselves against what can be quite a ferocious and abusive inquisition of their lives.
I do not like spending my free time asking adults to make good choices. Texas legislators have been attacking me since pre-K.
It's a nightmare situation that's very real and in our world. The Squirrels have a bit of a sesh talking about the annoyance of Greer before they commit to kicking her ass on the court despite her attempts to interfere and fuck up Brooklyn. Though I do also like the fact that Ty mentions the non-binariness in this context and how that does raise a few questions about how Greer would react to that information.
No one tell her I'm non-binary. Her brain might explode.
Like, would Greer demand that Ty can't play, or do they view Ty as woman enough or woman adjacent, despite their gender identity, to be on the girls' volleyball team? It's the small hypocrisies that I really do think go a long way to illustrating the flaws of much of the bigots that Moon Girl is mimicking here with the episode's villain. Greer and Brooklyn have another face-off, where Greer demands that Brooklyn sit the game out because she wants a fair game, before then deciding to go full supervillain and lock the squirrels into their locker room with a mysterious looking key to ensure that they can't play the game at all.
You won't play at all.
Some real fucking sinister shit going on there. The magical key transforms the door and then turns the locker room into a puzzle task in a different dimension that the squad has to solve to get out and return to the game. While Greer gloats about how they're gonna lose the game according to the rules to the people back in the regular dimension trying to figure out where the fuck their team has gone.
When the referee blows his whistle, they'll be disqualified. Just the rules.
Lawrence Fishburne then turns up as the trickster deity thing, the Beyonder, to fourth wall break and explain to us in the audience exactly what the key was and how Greer got it from a supervillain yard sale. And the Beyonder here respects Brooklyn's pronouns in the description, which I appreciate from the big guy. Thumbs up for the potentially evil trickster thing.
Ding, 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 ding! Our girl Brooklyn's onto something!
And yeah, the team just has to solve what is effectively an escape room. Now, there ain't a lot of trans elements for quite a bit here. We get more Coach Greer trying to use her rulebook to get the squirrels disqualified, and the squirrels go through a bunch of wacky little bullshit tests to get 20 keys and get out while saving each other and proving how much of a team that they are. Oh, I also just have to assume that for a lot of people in the Marvel universes, all of this ridiculous shenanigan stuff is just kinda what happens and they're used to it. Though I recognise Moon Girl is technically in its own canon that is separate from the regular MCU you might know of, but it uses much of the same touchstones, like S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers and Captain America.
I was gonna give it back.
Close enough to be the same, but there ain't any talk about the invasion of New York by aliens or everyone getting dusted for 5 years. Then the red T-Rex turns up and sings the opening song for the squirrels with a tiny microphone, a branded t-shirt, and some shades on. Yeah, that's pretty fucking cool. However, while the team does successfully solve all the key puzzles, they find themselves stuck being unable to escape, and instead just launched into another puzzle room, with the same 20 keyholes and the same obnoxious Coach Greer hologram telling them to play fairly and they'll get out.
Hello, and welcome to my game. You must follow my rules.
Brooklyn then realizes what the problem is, as the music gets all sad, talking about how to get out of the locker room, they have to obey Greer's rules, and that because Brooklyn is transgender, that breaks the world that Greer has created for themselves with this key, and therefore the rules. Shit gets real bummer for a second, as Brooklyn gets hit by the fact that she has to quit the team for them to get out. And then Moon Girl kinda gives us the thesis of the escape room allegory, as the team comes to Brooklyn and tells her how they are her friends and her allies, with Brooklyn literally saying this line.
It's just, how many doors? How many doors do I have to break through until they stop locking me out?
Yeah, bit on the nose, but this is a show designed to be for kids, so I'm not out here expecting Tenet or anything. No, see, this is actually engageable and enjoyable.
Well, this is the fun thing about Tenet is, for me, it's harder to talk about than it is to just watch it and understand it.
Yeah, fuck you, Nolan. This is a chance for us to explore the idea of how a lot of trans people, trans kids especially in the world right now, worry about their place in things, and worry about becoming a problem for their families or their friends. Worry about being a burden because of all the political rhetoric and shitty adults who have basically emotionally bullied them into doubting themselves and their place in society. It illustrates the horrifying realities for a lot of trans youth, and it does so in a way that educates the cis audience while also giving an outlet to experience encouragement for trans kids who watch it. Or would have watched it. We'll get to that sentiment later. The squad comes together, and through an outburst of Brooklyn, they realise that the only way to defeat Greer's simulation and to escape is by destroying the system that her rules uphold. A system that is designed to be unfair towards a specific group of people, and that cannot be fixed by just going along with the rules.
I'm sorry.
No, I think you're onto something.
Queer liberation ringing any bells there for anyone? you know, it's nice to see it making an appearance in this kids show. Gotta start them young on knowing that sometimes society doesn't play fair, especially for minorities, and the best way to beat the system is to circumvent it or destroy it. Greer's daughter then saves the day on the outside by stopping her mother and saying that she just wants an actual fair game, which leads to Coach Greer then openly revealing the fact that she only views Brooklyn as who she used to be, despite not actually knowing Brooklyn before any of this. So I guess Coach Greer reveals how she views Brooklyn as what she imagines a trans girl to be.
Why I pushed to disqualify that former boys soccer player.
Which gets called out for what it is: hatred, discrimination, and unkindness. The team then escapes from the escape room by violently dismantling the facade which blocks the real door to liberation, though first they have to go through a bunch of 8-bit video game scenarios that feel like are just in here because the storyboarders and animators wanted to have fun with it, before the squad uses a trans volleyball which emanates rainbow light to destroy a giant shadow spider version of Coach Greer. Yeah, it actually gets kinda hardcore as shit, to be honest, and it is a huge fucking shame that this whole episode got got shelved for a period of time that might stretch into forever. It's also all done to the sound of Unlock It by Charlie XCX featuring Kim Petras, which, I feel like every hyperpop song is always 1 second away from being made into a queer anthem anyways, but one with a trans person singing on it seems even more so appropriate for the moment. Especially a very vocal trans person who was heavily involved with being a trans activist when she herself was a child.
Kim Petras, who is probably the youngest person in the world to have a sex change.
It's all layers within layers here, you know, like a cake or an onion.
Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it. We both have layers.
The squirrels then appear on the court and get ready to play, having defeated transphobia and its representative of Coach Greer in this episode, telling her specifically that no matter how many doors she puts up, Brooklyn is always gonna break them down with her fight and her team behind her. Greer then gets super Karen for a second before she gets kicked out of the gymnasium.
More information! I know some very important people! I could have your certification revoked!
And see, I knew she was a Karen, of course it was. Before the game starts with Coach Greer's kid happy to play against a trans person, because bigotry ain't hereditary. And that's the episode, baby!
Ready, Captain? Always.
It's a happy message at the end and a sign of the continual fight towards a progressive future that can be won through friends and allyship against the stodgy old order who forces a rule set on you that just doesn't work. Now, that's the episode review, and it's time to move on to an examination of the impact that this had and the people involved. Firstly, I'm going to get my due diligence comment out of the way and mention how Brooklyn is voiced by Inja Moore, a non-binary transgender actor who you might know from such shows as Pose and Steven Universe and films like Nimona and Aquaman.
Young boy, I love my sister.
I love you too.
While Ty is voiced by Ian Alexander, another non-binary transgender actor who previously worked on The Last of Us Part 2 and Star Trek Discovery.
I told you, I'm still me. Just more me.
So we're immediately out here ticking the boxes needed to have me be happy about seeing trans voices used for trans characters and trans actors in trans roles, something which has become more and more recognised as a vital part of giving the community a foot in the door for an industry which has long been hostile to minorities. So full marks there from a behind the scenes vantage, especially for the fact that we're not just seeing trans characters voiced by trans actors, but trans POC characters voiced by trans POC actors. Good to get away from the overwhelming whiteness that seems to permeate everything, a whiteness that I know I'm not helping with personally, but it is what it is. It's also important here to discuss the way that the show presents these trans themes and trans characters for the audience. An audience that is going to be primarily composed of children, and so need admittedly clearer and more well-defined moral structures to learn from. And what the fuck am I even doing here? Seriously, what's the point of discussing all of the themes and how they connect to the audience? I know, you know, the title knows, heck, the whole fucking internet knows, this episode never got aired. It was mysteriously shelved before release, though still part of the programming enough that people were aware that it existed right up until it got just straight up leaked a few weeks ago by somebody. Maybe a person involved in the creation who was angry at some of the behind the scenes decisions that saw the gatekeeper removed from Disney's streaming service and channel. But yeah, there's no point talking about what impact it has in that regard, because it never got the chance to be impactful. All I could really mention would be how I would expect it to have been received by the audience, who can only get it now by trawling through sites to find one of the links that Disney hasn't nuked from existence yet to try and erase the leak. It would have been positive and good if that's worth anything, but I mean, I think our time here is better spent exploring what happened to the episode and why it got banned. Sorry, not banned. I know Disney made it very clear they didn't ban it, they just withheld it over a year ago for the purpose of ensuring that families would be able to have conversations around social issues themselves before art forced kids to think about it. Something which is, frankly, fucking bullshit. Leaving these kinds of social moments and conversations to family is basically conceding to the bigots and admitting that they get to control the conversation by erasing the existence of trans people in one of our most important mediums for getting people to be empathetic towards us, that of art and entertainment. I can't think of a better place to give kids the momentum to ask questions about this topic that desperately needs people to be thinking and looking more into it, namely that of trans sports.
All I want is a fair game.
Same here.
Great, do the right thing and sit this one out.
There is a lot of incredibly negative rhetoric going around right now that seeks to remove trans people from sports entirely. Rhetoric which is heavily built upon that same notion that Greer was so hard about, the rules designed to ensure fairness, a conversation which is rooted far more in a bigoted perception of trans women than it is within reality.
And is it correct you just started identifying as female 2 weeks ago?
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Okay, I think it's time to have the moment about this. Trans women are not dominating women's sports. In fact, prior to this huge wave of complaints that demand for organizations to change their standards away from scientifically and medically proven ones and towards ones based more on a transphobic vibe about what trans women are, most trans women competed in sports based on a guideline that saw them have to go through years of HRT and ensure a baseline level of testosterone way below that of your average cis woman. A process that effectively made up for any biological advantages, ain't that a loaded fucking statement, and ensured a level of fairness in professional sports. It's why, despite the claims, you can't really point to the Olympics or point to any major sporting event and see a wave of trans women gold medalists or trans women world champions. Also, fairness in sports is admittedly bullshit. Why aren't we banning this man? He's cheating in every level biologically advantage-wise. Take all his medals away.
Because it has to be a level playing field. I think that's something that we all need.
His size 14 feet might as well be flippers. His size hands grab water like a pair of paddles.
Now, I would also like to say there's nothing wrong if a trans woman does become a champion. A trans woman has as much of a right to win as anyone else. But statistically speaking, we're a tiny minority, and so therefore it being dominated by cis women just sort of makes sense. I mean, this site here lists 24 trans women who have managed to win or perform somewhat well at a national and international level, but that's still only 24 people out of the thousands of women who are winning shit. It really just wasn't, and still isn't, an actual big problem. It's just that it conceptually works quite well into that visual that people have of trans women. A visual that is based upon predetermined biases and stereotypes that subconsciously make a lot of those who see themselves as totally fine with trans people actually quite transphobic in how they view our community and the people in it as basically just men, but I'll pretend to be nice to them. That makes people jump to the worst conclusions and accept the worst views on us because it just sort of feels right towards what they expect men to be like.
I'm a survivor of rape, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, and I'm not going to allow any man in any female private space.
And as I said, it's the job of art, of TV and film and book and social media to provide people more examples of our community, to give insights into our lives and struggles that allow for a cis audience to make the connections that allow for sympathy to happen and for empathy to develop. Not every cis person is gonna have a trans person in their lives who they can learn from. And so we have to turn to these more mainstream modes with which to reach out as a community and break the conceptual stereotypical idea of us as a monolith. Now, unfortunately, that brings us back to this banned episode of Moon Girl. As we see this great episode for kickstarting that empathy, especially amongst kids, put away by a corporation who clearly want to do their best to appease every side. An appeasement which ultimately really fucks us over. I mean, the artists for Moon Girl came out in a few articles and posited that the real reason why the episode never got aired was because of the election results being so heavily Republican dominant. And so Disney is trying to hedge their bets with whoever is going to keep letting them make money. Something which Disney denied, of course. Obviously they're going to do that. They're trying to also still keep having queer people and queer allies as a marketable demographic that will buy their shit after all. I mean, all those fucking rainbow Mickey Mouses don't exist for nobody. So honestly, I would probably trust the artists here over the big corporation with plenty of economic reasons to not tell the truth about their motivations and keep obfuscating so they can make money. And I think all of that really proves is the thing that you already know I'm gonna say, because of the fucking poster, but that people have been saying for a while now in every community, which is you can't trust corporations to be part of anyone's liberation, especially queer liberation. They are just as likely to support us as they are to destroy us, all dependent on whether there is money to be made from it and not from any actual serious moral standpoint. You can't trust that, and the sooner we all realise that buying a float for pride and talking about new hiring diversity programs is not the same as being behind the LGBT community, the less shocked you're gonna be over the next 4 years as those companies get worse and worse. However, with that noted, it is important to align two things I've said here. Because while we can't trust corporations to have our backs and to be on the side of minorities like the trans community, we also need to recognise that they have a monopoly on mainstream media and the modes by which art is able to reach the audiences that we need to reach. I know, it feels like being between a rock and a hard place. It feels like I'm telling you two things that invite you to just tune out and give up. We can't rely on Disney to be queer friendly. They've proven their willingness to shelve and ban and cancel and edit our stories whenever it seems convenient to appeal to anti-LGBTQ nations and governments. Yet, we're stuck having to work through Disney to be able to have cis audiences see queer stories and connect with them at all, as well as trans audiences finding themselves reflected in their media. I mean, goddamn if Moon Girl didn't sum it up very well. You can't win working within the system because all the rules are rigged and the real victory is hidden behind the game that they force you to play.
Come on, let us out!
But we did everything right!
But I wouldn't say give up just yet. Sure, on a larger scale to affect change, you really need a mass systemic upheaval that sees these oppressive hierarchies of power that define and defend the rules that favour them dismantled, and I absolutely do not have a blueprint for achieving that. But what I can offer you instead is a smaller, achievable victory, and by God do we need those right now. See, Disney's a company who bowed to the perceived political whims that would want an episode like The Gatekeeper pulled. The only way you can fight that, in the system that we have currently, is by playing the same game the Conservatives play with getting LGBTQ books pulled from libraries or trans people removed from bathrooms. You put pressure on them. You complain. You make a huge fucking stink that forces them to backtrack out of fear of having their brand tarnished. And so, what I'm telling you to do here is have a fucking go at them. Complain, bully, cajole, hit them on every social media you can think of. Spread the links for the Gatekeeper around so that people can find it and download it and watch it regardless of Disney's involvement. So they can show it to their friends or their family or their kids, despite Disney trying to withhold it. These are not long-term solutions, and they are not fixes to the big problem behind it. But The Gatekeeper is a really, really good trans episode. It has some great morals and allegories and lessons to be learned about the trans experience, specifically explored through the lens of a character who is a part of the trans youth that are dealing with a lot of shit right now, and could do with that kind of representation on the screen.
Doesn't matter how many doors people like you slam in my face. I'm always gonna find my way out.
The video deserves to be released. It deserves to not be shelved and forgotten just because some dude got elected into power and a corporation is too scared to take a financially potentially inconvenient political stance. And so, in that interest, below this video will be a little box called Random Stuff, which will just be a bunch of curated links to who knows what. I mean, certainly not the episode that I'm talking about here today. It's a bunch of random links. I'm fully aware that Disney doesn't want it shared, so, you know, I would never do that. It's just a link, okay? But maybe check it out. While you're down there, however, I also wouldn't complain if you felt like checking out that Patreon link, especially if you liked the video and what I did or said or have made here. Those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I really appreciate everyone on there for allowing me to make videos like this and to frankly make videos at all. The money on my Patreon goes towards paying things like food, rent, power, internet, and cat. This cat specifically, all of which are essential things for allowing me to do YouTube and focus on the videos that I want to outmake. Things are a little bit tricky right now, I know, trust me. It ain't just the USA dealing with a bunch of bullshit. New Zealand has its own massive government-based issues and huge economic recession and crash happening and a complete loss of jobs, which is making it quite hard to find employment. But if you have the money to spare and want to support the channel, it is much appreciated and goes a long way towards encouraging me to keep making videos, giving me a clear financial justification to want to stick to what I'm doing, and also showing that there are people out there who enjoy what I make enough that they will pay to see it keep being made. Also, if you want to like, share, subscribe, and comment, those are all the classic YouTube things that probably help the video or the channel. I actually don't know if that's true, to be honest, but I do generally read all my comments, so it's worth doing if you have something you want to say. You can also check out some more videos too. There's a lot of cool stuff on the channel that covers quite a bit of depth of content. Most of it trans-related, but trans stuff from all over the place with regards to medium and time period and quality. I'm sort of trying to do my best to make a video on every bit of trans representation, a truly Sisyphean task that might just never end up getting done, but maybe it's the journey and what you learn on the way that matters, rather than the end goal. Regardless, thank you to everyone who is on my Patreon, and also to everyone who watched this video. I hope you have a great day, and remember, get on Disney's ass for this shit. The artists and the writers and the actors worked really hard on this trans episode and it fucking shows, and it deserves to be free.
I don't want to be a burden.
That's exactly how I felt when I asked people to use different pronouns for me.